over here you can see two neurons, and between these neurons over here at the dendrites and over here at the end plates of the axon, you can see that there's a little gap, and this little gap is referred to as the synapse. And I have over here made a larger picture, and this gap over here is known as the synapse, or sometimes they call it also the synaptic cleft. Synaptic, you cannot see the T anymore here, cleft. There's a gap between the membranes of the axon and the membrane of the dendrite of the next neuron. And what happens here is that a nerve signal which travels down the axon reaches the end of the neuron, and then the signal has to be passed on to the next nerve cell, to the next neuron. And there are special chemical events that happen over here at the synapse. And what happens basically is that the neuron from which the signal comes from releases a chemical, and the name of the chemical is known as acetylcholine. So a nerve signal travels down over here, reaches the end of the axon, and then chemicals are released. Acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter, is released into the synaptic cleft. They diffuse across the synaptic cleft, and when they reach the other membrane of the next neuron over here, a new nerve signal is generated, and the nerve signal is then passed on. And the neurotransmitter which hangs around here in the synaptic cleft has to be removed once its job has been done. Otherwise, the cell over here would always keep on firing and generating nerve signals, even though there is no nerve signal coming from over here. So we have to remove these neurotransmitters, and there is an enzyme that does that, and this enzyme is known as cholinesterase. So once the neurotransmitter has done its job, I'm just going to exit out. No, I'm not going. I'm just going to erase it, and the cholinesterase then removes the neurotransmitters again. And when the next nerve signal arrives, again, new neurotransmitter is released, a new nerve signal is generated, and then cholinesterase removes again the neurotransmitter. And that is basically the idea of how nerve signals are passed on across in a synapse. Now, how are nerve signals passed on over here within the neuron? And what happens is that the nerve signal travels along the membrane of the neuron, and then when it reaches these Schwann cells, the myelin, the signal jumps from node of Ranvier to node of Ranvier, and then over here it starts to travel along the membrane again. And when it reaches the synaptic cleft, then of course the whole story starts with the acetylcholine. And then over here the signal travels again across the membrane over here, all like this. And then over here it starts to jump again from node of Ranvier to node of Ranvier. Now that speeds up, that's fast. That's why you have that, because by jumping the nerve signal, you have a faster nerve impulse transmission. So let's move on to the next one. The fact that you have over here chemicals involved is quite useful for certain pesticides, and pesticides kill insects to protect the plants. And there are these categories of pesticides called neonicotinoids. Okay, a tongue twister. And what they do is they block the acetylcholine receptors on the dendrite. So this means that even though acetylcholine is released, a new nerve signal cannot be generated. So it blocks the transmission of nerve signals in the insect, and therefore it kills the insect. And that's basically how these neonicotinoids work, but also how many psychoactive drugs work, which have an effect on the synapse. And just recently I heard in the news that bees, which are unfortunately also affected by these pesticides, they have observed that these bees actually become addicted to the neonicotinoids. So it actually harms the bees, but at the same time, they also become addicted and actually show a preference for these chemicals. So that's a little bit of worrisome development, because of course bees are very important for pollination of plants. And so many farmers who have bees have experienced in the last couple of years a decrease in bee population because of these pesticides, or at least it is assumed, or there is strong evidence that these neonicotinoids can have also a factor, maybe not the only one, but also a factor in reducing bee population. And now I heard that these neonicotinoids are actually making the bees addicted, and what they also said in the news report, that the word nicotine is in here. So it seems to be chemically probably similar to the nicotine that you have in tobacco. So just a little sidetracking and some extra information here to tell you how chemicals can be used to manipulate or to inhibit synaptic transmission.